The wind howled like a beast at the frozen human outpost on the fringe of known space. Jagged ice clung to the metal hulls of the barracks and scattered machinery, and snow drifted in swirling curtains that blurred the horizon. Communications were down, satellites blacked out by the relentless storm. The soldiers inside huddled in the warmth, faces tight with fatigue and unspoken dread. At the center of the dimly lit mess hall, Captain Lyra Voss paced, her boots echoing on the cold floor. Every few minutes, she glanced toward the heavy blast, doors as they groaned under the weight of the gale outside. Her unit was stretched thin, morale low, and supplies running dangerously low. Out here at the edge of humanity's reach, hope was a rare commodity. The doors hissed suddenly, and the room froze. A figure appeared in the doorway, framed by the harsh red warning lights, an alien, tall and gaunt, clad in battered armor that looked centuries old. His skin was mottled with gray and blue hues, and his eyes glinted with a strange, icy intensity. His face bore scars like ancient runes, each one telling a story of countless battles. "Identify yourself," Captain Voss demanded, hand hovering, near her weapon. The alien's voice was low and gravelly, carrying an accent foreign to human ears but clear nonetheless. "Zarthal, former mercenary, veteran of the Frontlines. I come with knowledge that could save lives." Suspicion rippled through the soldiers. Aliens were usually enemies or at best uneasy allies, but an alien veteran seeking asylum or offering stories of war was unheard of. Voss narrowed her eyes but saw no immediate threat. The desperation in the outpost whispered that maybe, just maybe, this stranger could offer something worth listening to. "Step inside," she ordered. "You've got 10 minutes. No weapons drawn." Zarthal moved with deliberate calm, shedding, his helmet to reveal a face hardened by years of conflict but marked by something else, a weariness that suggested loss and regret. The soldiers gathered cautiously, the youngest ones exchanging nervous glances. They had heard the tales of the brutal war waged against a relentless alien foe, a war that had dragged on for decades. Few had seen the battlefield firsthand. Now, before them stood someone who had fought alongside humans and survived. As the storm battered the walls, Zarthal's voice dropped to a measured cadence. "I have fought many wars, many battles, but none as strange, as fierce, as humbling as the war with your people. The enemy you face is unlike any other, but so are you." He paused, letting his words settle. The soldiers leaned in, drawn to the promise of stories from the front lines, tales not from official reports or propaganda, but from raw, brutal experience. In the beginning, your people were disorganized, a scattered force desperate for survival. But you adapted. You learned. You fought with a madness that confused and terrified our enemies. Your weapons may not have been the most advanced, but your will was unmatched. One of the young soldiers, a recruit named Hale, whispered, "What kind of madness?" Zarthal's eyes darkened. "The kind born from hope and desperation. The kind that makes you stand when every instinct screams to flee. The kind that turns fear into a weapon." The room grew quiet as the alien veterans' stories began to unfold, a mosaic of terror, cunning, sacrifice, and victory. He spoke of nights when starships burned like shooting stars, when entire planets became graveyards, and when humanity's unpredictability shattered enemy strategies. But he did not shy away from the cost. "Many of your bravest fell not to enemy fire, but to their own fears, their own doubts. War is a crucible, and humanity was forged in its flames." Captain Voss felt a flicker of something she had not felt in months. Hope. Here was a witness from the darkest battlefields, a voice that echoed the defiant spirit she saw every day in her soldiers. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the outpost, the fragile warmth of connection began to kindle. Zarthal's stories promised that even in the harshest conditions, even when the odds were stacked against them, humanity's fire could not be extinguished. As the first part of his tale came to an end, Zarthal fixed his gaze on the young soldiers. "Tomorrow I will tell you about the siege of Korath IV, a battle you will never forget. But for now, remember this. Your enemy fears not your weapons, but your spirit. The soldiers exchanged looks, a mix of awe and determination. The alien veteran was no mere storyteller. He was a herald of the human will, fierce, unyielding, and unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Voss nodded. We'll listen, and we'll fight, together. The storm had passed, but a heavy silence hung over the outpost. Outside, the barren landscape lay blanketed in a pale frost, untouched yet ominous. The young soldiers, still buzzing from Zarthal's arrival, gathered again in the mess hall. Captain Voss nodded for them to sit, the weight of what was to come settling in the air. Zarthal stood before them, his tall frame casting long shadows in the dim light. He folded his arms, eyes distant as if peering into memories buried deep beneath years of battle. The first contact, he began, voice low and steady, was nothing like the reports you've read. No grand speeches, no diplomatic talks, just terror, chaos, and death. He paced slowly, the room hanging on every word. It was a night like any other in the Outer Rim, a small human fleet guarding mining operations near the Dravex cluster. Then, from the dark void they came, silent, swift, and lethal. The enemy, known later as the Jarkari, descended like shadows made flesh. Zarthal's eyes flickered with something fierce. Our scanners detected nothing. No signals, no heat signatures. One moment the fleet was intact. The next, whole ships exploded in bursts of blue fire. A young private swallowed hard. How did the humans survive? The veteran smiled grimly. They didn't. Not at first. Their losses were catastrophic. But humanity, unlike any other species I've fought alongside, did not accept defeat. In the ruins of that first night, a spark was lit. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. The survivors were ragged, stripped of most weapons, outnumbered 10-1. But they had something we didn't expect. Raw, unpredictable ingenuity. They jury-rigged weapons from scrap, hacked, alien tech with reckless courage, and fought with a madness that borders on the suicidal. One soldier's eyes widened. Madness? Yes. Zarthal nodded. One night, a small squad of humans rigged a cluster of drones to detonate in the middle of an enemy ambush, sacrificing everything to buy time for their fleet's escape. Another time, they used the electromagnetic pulses of their mining lasers to disable a Jarkari stealth ship mid-flight. He paused, letting the shock settle in. They had no master plan, no great generals, just desperation and will. It was chaotic, dangerous, and deeply human. Captain Voss crossed her arms. We've trained for discipline, order. Are you saying chaos is our advantage? Zarthal met her gaze. Not chaos for chaos' sake, but the willingness to defy expectations. The Jarkari were creatures of cold logic, strategy perfected over millennia. They could not anticipate unpredictability fueled by hope, fear, and raw survival instinct. He ran a hand through his graying hair. I remember one encounter vividly. A young lieutenant, barely older than you, led a strike team into a derelict space station. The enemy expected a frontal assault. Instead, the humans used the station's ancient mining robots as decoys, turning them into weapons with nothing but jury-rigged code and sheer nerve. The soldiers leaned in. They fought like demons. The Jarkari called them the Madness after that battle. It was a label born from fear. No alien wanted to face humans on the field. The room fell quiet. The raw truth in Zarthal's voice cut through the usual bravado. This was no simple war. It was a clash of instincts, cultures, and wills. Your species has a kind of madness, he continued softly. Not the madness of fools, but of those who refuse to die quietly. It's terrifying to those who value order over spirit. A young soldier named Mina, eyes shining with newfound respect, whispered, So it's not just about weapons or numbers? Zarthal smiled faintly. No, it's about something deeper. The fire inside you. That fire saved more lives than any weapon could. And it saved me. He took a breath, the weight of memory heavy on him. I fought alongside humans when most mercenaries fled or surrendered. Their will to survive, their refusal to break, gave me hope when all seemed lost. A sudden clang from the outer corridor startled them. Captain Voss stood quickly, hand on her weapon, but it was just a technician returning from repairs. The tension lingered, a reminder that out here, threats were always close. Zarthal's voice softened. I'll tell you about the siege of Korath 4 tomorrow, a battle where that fire burned brightest and where many paid the ultimate price. As the soldiers dispersed, the seed of something fierce had been planted. They were no longer just young recruits in a forgotten outpost. They were heirs to a legacy of survival and defiance that could shape the galaxy. Outside, the cold wind whispered across the frozen plains. But inside, the flames of hope flickered, wild, unpredictable, and utterly human. The cold light of Korath 4's dying sun cast long shadows across the battered battlefield. Zarthal's voice lowered, heavy with the weight of memory. Korath 4 was a nightmare, he began. A mining colony turned frontline, cut off from all support. The humans there were surrounded, outnumbered by at least 5 to 1, facing an enemy that wanted nothing less than total annihilation. The soldiers around him shifted uncomfortably, imagining themselves trapped in a war zone with no hope of rescue. Zarthal's gaze locked onto each of them. Your commanders called it a lost cause. I called it a test of human spirit. The siege lasted for weeks. Days blurred into nights under constant bombardment. The sky burned with plasma, fire and debris, yet the defenders did not falter. Zarthal spoke of the improvised weapons the humans fashioned from the wreckage of destroyed ships and mining equipment, makeshift railguns, scrap metal mines, and electronic traps wired from scavenged parts. They were ingenious. Their tactics were like nothing I'd seen before. When the enemy advanced, the humans melted into the ruins, striking like ghosts, hit and run, ambushes. They knew the terrain better than anyone and turned every scrap into a weapon. He paused, the room hanging on his words. One night, the enemy launched a full-scale assault, sending monstrous bioengineered beasts that tore through the human lines. I expected the defenders to crumble. Instead, Zarthal recounted how a handful of human soldiers detonated a chain reaction of explosives in the narrow canyon surrounding the colony, burying the beasts and enemy troops alive. It was a desperate gamble, one that cost many lives, but saved thousands more. Their leader, a young woman named Rena Kael, led that charge, Zarthal said with a rare softness. She was fearless, even when everything was lost. Her voice on the comms kept the fighters grounded. She wasn't just a soldier. She was a beacon. He rubbed a long scar on his arm, a souvenir from the battle. I fought alongside her. I saw what humans can do when pushed to the brink. Not just fight, but fight with a ferocity born of hope and pure defiance. Zarthal's eyes darkened as he recalled the worst moments. The enemy was relentless. They used fear tactics, dropping bodies, spreading false information, trying to break the human will. But the defenders held. Even when their food ran low and medical supplies disappeared, the humans refused to surrender. Zarthal admitted it baffled him. They fought not for glory, not for medals, but because they believed in something greater than themselves, their homes, their families, their future. At one point, Zarthal described a moment when Rena and her team executed a daring raid behind enemy lines to destroy a critical supply depot. The mission was near suicidal, but their success turned the tide of the siege. The enemy expected an orderly retreat. Instead, they got chaos, confusion, and brutal retaliation. Captain Voss leaned forward, voice sharp. And the losses? Severe, Zarthal said quietly. Many did not make it back. But their sacrifice inspired others across the galaxy. The siege of Korath 4 became a symbol, not of defeat, but of resistance. The room was silent, the magnitude of the story sinking in. One young soldier, voice barely audible, asked, "Why did you fight with them? You're alien." Zarthal's expression softened. Because I saw in humans something I had never seen before, a refusal to accept defeat, even when death was certain. That defiance rekindled my own spirit. I fought because their fight became my fight. He looked out the frost-covered windows, as if still seeing that shattered colony under siege. Korath IV showed me the true heart of humanity. Not perfect, not always wise, but unbreakable. The young soldiers exchanged glances, some gripping their weapons tighter. Zarthal's stories were no longer distant legends, they were a call to arms. As the session ended, Zarthal's final words hung heavy in the air. Remember Korath IV. Remember Rena Kael. Because you may face your own sieges one day. And, when that time comes, it's your spirit that will decide if you live or die. Outside, the stars blinked cold and indifferent, but inside the outpost a fire had been lit. One that would burn long after the storm. The small group of soldiers sat circled around Zarthal in the dim mess hall, the cold from outside seeping through the walls but forgotten as the veteran's voice dropped into a somber tone. He stared at them, the weight of his next story heavy in his eyes. You already know how humans fight with guns and grit, he began. But the deadliest weapon they wield isn't a rifle, a starship, or even a bioengineered beast. It's something far more dangerous. Their mind. The room fell quiet, the youngest recruits shifting uneasily. The idea of war as a mental battlefield was foreign, almost unsettling. In all my years fighting across the galaxy's bloodiest conflicts, I've never seen a species manipulate fear, hope, and madness so well, Zarthal said slowly. Humans turn emotions into weapons. They weaponize unpredictability. He leaned forward, voice low and urgent. Other species plan, calculate, execute. They rely on logic and perfect strategy. Humans, they harness chaos, madness. The soldiers listened intently as Zarthal began recounting a particular mission that would change his understanding of war and of humanity forever. It was during the War of the Shattered Stars, he explained. A small human squad was sent on what many considered a suicide mission, to infiltrate an enemy stronghold deep within the Veil Nebula. The enemy was a ruthless species called the Krashtan, known for their brutal discipline and near-perfect coordination. Their strongholds were fortresses, guarded by psychic dampeners and mechanized sentries. The humans didn't stand a chance on paper, Zarthal said with a bitter laugh, but they had something no one else had. Madness fueled by desperation, he described the squad's leader, a soldier named Captain Mara Vel, who had lost her entire platoon in a previous battle but refused to give up. Mara was broken, but in that brokenness she became something else, a force no one could predict. Zarthal recounted how Mara and her team used psychological warfare that stunned even the Krashtan commanders. They sent false transmissions that mimicked enemy voices, sowing confusion. They hacked into Krashtan communication, broadcasting distorted sounds and whispers that unsettled even the most hardened soldiers. The alien veteran's voice grew grim. They booby-trapped their own shadows, rigged holograms to appear in impossible places, and used guerrilla tactics that made the Krashtan question their own reality. The squad's unpredictability caused the enemy to hesitate, fracturing their precise strategies. It was as if the humans fought not only with weapons but with madness itself. Zarthal took a breath, his eyes darkening. That madness was contagious. Even I felt it, an urge to abandon my training and embrace chaos just to survive. He confessed how he had witnessed Mara's squad pull off impossible feats, not through technology, but through sheer will and mental resilience. They fought while wounded, while starving, driven by fear and hope tangled so tightly it became a weapon no enemy could withstand. One soldier raised a hand, voice shaky. But isn't madness dangerous? Doesn't it break people? Zarthal nodded slowly. Yes, madness can destroy. But humans have mastered walking the razor's edge, using madness without being consumed by it. It's not reckless chaos, but a calculated madness. He looked around the room, locking eyes with the young soldiers. This is what makes you different. Your emotions, your rage, your hope, your pain, can break the strongest chains. He leaned back, voice softer now. Maravel's squad didn't just destroy an enemy stronghold. They shattered a myth that the Krashtan were invincible, After that, the tide began to turn. Zarthal's expression grew distant. But the cost was high. Most of Mara's squad never returned. Madness is a double-edged sword. The soldiers digested the story in silence, the truth resonating deeply. Captain Voss finally spoke. So the human weapon is unpredictability? Emotional resilience? Yes, Zarthal agreed. It's your greatest strength, and the enemy's greatest fear. They can't calculate madness because it defies logic. You fight not only with guns, but with heart and mind. He rose slowly. Tomorrow I'll tell you how this madness forged bonds stronger than steel, how humans and aliens fought side by side, becoming something greater than the sum of their parts. As the session ended, the soldiers left with a new understanding. The war was not just fought in fields or starships, but within their very minds. Outside, the cold stars blinked down, indifferent to the struggles of a small human outpost. But inside, the fire of madness and hope burned brighter than ever. The mess hall was quieter than before. The storm had passed days ago, but a chill still lingered in the air, not from the cold outside, but from the weight of Zarthal's stories. Tonight, the alien veteran's voice carried something new: hope, connection, and an unspoken promise. I have fought many wars, Zarthal began, and I have seen species rise and fall. But one thing is constant. War makes enemies of strangers, but it also forges brothers and sisters in arms. He paused, looking around at the young soldiers, some still skeptical, others wide-eyed. Humans are stubborn, fierce, and sometimes you surprise even those who have fought alongside you. When I first joined your ranks, I was an outsider, a relic of another time, another war. You did not trust me. I was a stranger wearing strange armor, speaking strange words. A quiet laugh rippled through the room. Captain Voss nodded, recalling the early days of their uneasy alliance. But war does not care for mistrust or prejudice, Zarthal continued. It cares only for survival. And in that crucible, we found something unexpected. He told of the battle at Arc 7, a scorched desert world where humans and aliens were forced to fight side by side against a relentless Jarkari offensive. The humans were outgunned and outnumbered, their lines crumbling under fire. But then, the alien mercenaries, my people, joined the fight. At first we fought apart, each guarding our own ranks. Zarthal's eyes glinted. But when the enemy pushed harder, something changed. A young human sergeant saved my life from a falling debris blast. Later I saved his from a Jarkari sniper. Trust was born from necessity. He smiled faintly, the memory vivid. We fought together, side by side, covering each other's backs. The bond forged in battle is stronger than any treaty or alliance. The soldiers leaned in, drawn by the warmth beneath Zarthal's tough exterior. Rena Kale from Korath 4 once told me, "In this war, the only family we have is those who stand beside us in the fire." She was right. Zarthal described the nights spent around campfires, sharing stories and laughter despite the constant threat looming beyond the perimeter. We became a single force, a patchwork of species and cultures, united by a single goal: survival and victory. The aliens learned from the humans' unpredictability. The humans learned discipline and tactics from us. Together, we became a nightmare to our enemies. Captain Voss smiled, remembering the alien veteran's unwavering loyalty. You risked your life for us. Zarthal nodded solemnly. Because you showed me the strength of your spirit. Your courage was contagious. I fought harder, bled deeper, because of you. He looked at the young soldiers, voice steady and sincere. War is more than weapons and strategy. It's about trust, brotherhood. The bonds you form will carry you through your darkest hours. One recruit, a quiet girl named Elin, raised her hand. But what about the enemies among us? How do you trust when you don't know who might betray you? The veteran's gaze darkened. War breeds suspicion. Betrayal is a shadow always lurking. But the true strength is in choosing to trust despite fear. In fighting not just for yourself, but for your brothers and sisters. He recounted a harrowing tale of betrayal during a joint operation, where an alien squad turned traitor, selling secrets to the enemy. The cost was terrible, lives lost, plans shattered, but the survivors didn't give up. Instead, they tightened their bonds, refusing to let treachery break their will. Trust is a risk, Zarthal said quietly, but it is the foundation of all victory. The soldiers sat in silence, absorbing the gravity of his words. Tomorrow, Zarthal promised, I will tell you about the raid on the enemy's heart, a mission that changed everything. But tonight, remember this: you are not alone. In the darkness of war, brothers in arms are the light. As the session ended, the young soldiers looked at each other with newfound respect, not just for Zarthal, but for each other. The war was brutal and unforgiving, but it was also a place where bonds could become unbreakable. Outside the outpost, the stars burned cold and distant. Inside, the fire of unity flickered stronger than ever, promising that together they could face whatever horrors lay ahead. The air in the briefing room was thick with tension. Zarthal's eyes gleamed with a fierce intensity as he recounted the tale that had become legend among human and alien alike: the raid on the Jarkari's fortress, the heart of their war machine. This mission was unlike any other, Zarthal began, voice low and steady. It was a strike against the enemy's command center, a heavily fortified bastion called the Crucible. Destroying it would cripple the Jarkari's ability to coordinate their forces. He paused, letting the weight of that fact sink in. The Crucible was a fortress carved into an asteroid the size of a small moon. Its walls were layered with energy shields, defense turrets, and a swarm of automated drones. Even the most advanced starships dared not come close. The soldiers around him shifted in their seats, imagining the nearly impregnable target. The humans, however, Zarthal said with a grim smile, did not rely on brute force alone. They planned something that seemed insane: an infiltration, a strike from within. He detailed the months of preparation, stolen schematics, hacked security codes, and the painstaking gathering of intelligence from captured enemies. The plan was audacious: to slip a small team past the fortress's defenses, plant explosives deep within, and escape before the whole thing blew sky high. The team was a mix of humans and aliens, including me, Zarthal admitted, the memory vivid in his eyes. We trained endlessly, learning to move silently, to hack and fight in zero gravity. The mission was a gamble. Failure meant death, and failure was almost certain. He described the infiltration itself: a ghostly descent through narrow maintenance shafts, evading patrols of terrifying Zarkari warriors, each step more perilous than the last. One moment, we were mere shadows, unseen and unheard. The next, alarms blared and the fortress erupted in chaos. Zarthal's voice rose, alive with the adrenaline of battle. We fought like demons, each of us pushed beyond pain, beyond fear. The humans led charges with reckless abandon, using every trick, every piece of jury-rigged tech. He spoke of Captain Maravel's squad once more, their fierce determination burning bright even in the crucible of fire. Explosions tore through the tunnels as we set charges on critical systems. The fortress began to collapse around us. But escape was the true test. As the enemy closed in, we had to fight our way through a gauntlet of death, our path cut by fire, debris, and the relentless enemy. Zarthal's voice softened as he recalled the losses. Many did not make it. Friends I had fought alongside for months fell to enemy blades and plasma fire. But those of us who survived escaped with knowledge and hope. He looked at the recruits with fierce pride. That raid changed the course of the war. The Crucible's destruction sent shockwaves through the Jarkari forces. Their communications faltered, their attacks slowed, and for the first time, we saw the enemy falter. Captain Voss shook her head in admiration. And you led that team? Zarthal nodded. We were a team bound by trust and madness, willing to risk everything. One recruit, voice trembling, asked, "How did you keep going when it seemed impossible?" Zarthal smiled, a rare warmth in his gaze. Because we believed in each other. Because surrender was not an option. Because in that moment, hope was stronger than fear. The room was silent, the lesson clear. War is more than strategy, Zarthal concluded. It's about heart, about the courage to face impossible odds and keep fighting. He stood, the session ending but the fire of his story burning bright in every listener. Outside, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if bearing witness to a small, fierce band of warriors who dared to defy the darkness. The silence in the mess hall was heavier tonight. Zarthal's eyes, usually sharp and commanding, held a deep sadness as he prepared to tell the tale that few wanted to hear, the true cost behind every hard-won victory. The raid on the Miao Crucible was a turning point, Zarthal began, voice rough with memory. But victory is never free. Every success has its shadow, and every triumph carries a price. He paced slowly, each step measured. After the fortress fell, the Jarkari retreated, their forces scattered and disorganized. For a moment hope blossomed across the alliance. But then the reality settled in. How much had we lost to get here? Zarthal's gaze swept the room. Many of those who fought with us are gone. Brothers and sisters lost to the endless hunger of war. He paused, swallowing hard. I lost friends. Rena Kale, Maravel, countless others. Their names are etched in memory, but their absence is a wound that never heals. A young recruit clenched his fists. Did it feel worth it? The sacrifices? Zarthal's voice softened. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. War doesn't give clear answers. It gives pain and questions. He told of the aftermath. The solemn funerals held in frozen wastelands, the silent moments before battle when grief was swallowed by duty. There was no time to mourn properly. The enemy was relentless and we had to keep fighting. But those losses shaped us. He described how the survivors carried their fallen comrades' memories like armor, fuel for their resolve and reminders of what they fought for. Zarthal's eyes grew distant. I remember one night after a brutal skirmish, standing watch, under alien stars. The cold bit into my bones, but what haunted me was the faces of those I failed to save. He sighed deeply. War breaks men and makes legends. Sometimes those are the same. Captain Voss nodded slowly, understanding the weight of leadership. But pain also brings growth, Zarthal continued. It forged bonds stronger than any steel. We learned to protect not just ourselves but each other, to carry the fallen with honor. He shared how the Alliance forged new tactics to minimize casualties, how medical teams pushed boundaries to save lives, and how soldiers learned to lean on each other, not just weapons. There was no glory in sacrifice, only survival and the hope that our deaths were not in vain. The soldiers listened, some with tears glimmering, others with quiet determination. Zarthal's voice was barely a whisper. I tell you this not to break your spirit, but to steel it, to remind you that behind every battle cry is a cost you will pay. He looked at the youngest recruit, who nodded solemnly. The war will test you, your body, your mind, your soul. But you must carry the shadows of sacrifice with pride, for it means you fought and lived to protect what matters. The room was heavy with respect and understanding. As you prepare for what's next, Zarthal said, voice firm once more, remember that victory is built on the backs of those who gave everything. Honor them by fighting harder. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them fierce once more. And never forget, sometimes the greatest battle is surviving the war within. Outside, the cold wind howled against the outpost walls, but inside, the fire of remembrance and resolve blazed fiercely. The room was filled with a quiet that only comes after stories that weigh heavy on the soul. Zarthal stood before the Yao soldiers, now more than listeners. They were bearers of a legacy forged in fire and blood. This war will end, Zarthal said, voice steady but filled with a profound certainty. Not because one side is stronger, but because the spirit of those who fight it refuses to die. He looked around at the young faces, each one carrying the flicker of something greater. Determination, hope, the will to survive. I have told you of battles, madness, bonds, sacrifices. But now I tell you of what it all means. The legacy you will inherit. Zarthal began recounting the aftermath of the war, how the Shattered Alliance stood together at the brink of collapse and yet chose unity over division. After the Crucible fell and the Jarkari faltered, the galaxy held its breath. Peace was not immediate, but it became possible. He spoke of the fragile treaties signed in distant halls where once only war cries echoed, of former enemies sitting at the same table, bound by a new respect. But peace is fragile, Zarthal warned. It must be guarded by those who remember what it cost. He paused, voice softening. The humans taught me that. Not just how to fight, but how to hope. The soldiers listened as he told of rebuilding, of planets scarred by war healing. Slowly, of families reunited, of the next generation growing up in a galaxy that dared to dream. But even in peace, the lessons remain, Zarthal said. That madness, courage, and brotherhood can shape worlds. That the human spirit is a flame that even the darkest night cannot extinguish. He walked to the window, gazing at the stars beyond. The war changed me. It changed all of us. But it also showed what is possible when you refuse to give in. Turning back, Zarthal smiled gently. You are the future, the bearers of this legacy. What you choose to do with it will shape the galaxy for generations. Captain Voss stepped forward. What advice do you have for those who will fight next? For those who will face their own battles? Zarthal looked her in the eye. Remember the stories. Remember Korra Thafur, Maravel's madness, the bonds forged in fire, and the shadows of sacrifice. He extended a hand, the scars on his skin a testament to survival. Carry these truths with you. Fight not just with weapons, but with heart. Protect those beside you, and never lose sight of hope. The soldiers stood, a silent vow passing between them. Zarthal's voice was quieter now, almost a whisper. Because in the end, it's not the battles or the victories that define us, it's the spirit we leave behind. As the outpost lights dimmed, the veterans and recruits alike felt a renewed sense of purpose. The stories were no longer just memories. They were a living, breathing call to courage. Outside, the stars shone with a brilliance that seemed to promise something eternal, that even in the vast darkness the human spirit would forever blaze bright.